Good evening, everyone. We will call to order the Oxnard City Council Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee meeting, which is a regular meeting for November 22nd, 2022. We should have started at 6:45. We got a little bit of a late start. I apologize. And directions for making comments are provided in the agenda should you choose to do so, either by being here or calling in. And Madam Clerk, if we could have the roll call and posting of the agenda, please.
Member Zaragoza,
Here.
Member Madrigal,
Here.
Chair McDonald.
Here.
We have a quorum, and the agenda for the meeting was posted on the City Hall Bulletin Board on November 15, 2022.
Thank you very much. If you would all please rise and join me in saluting the flag of our nation. Place your hand over your heart and follow. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which is fair, indivisible, with liberty. Thank you all. This will take us to item B, which are public comments on items not on the agenda. This is the time where speakers can address the committee based for items that would be under the purview of this committee, but are not agendized for discussion this evening. I have one request to speak, Mr. Larry Stein.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, general public and audience. I'm somewhat concerned. I had a public record request outstanding regarding the response times from the fire department. There's a public record request that was submitted back in June, the end of June, beginning of July. The documents provided are unreadable. They're not readable. I can't read them. This has been brought to the attention of the City Attorney's Office numerous occasions, and the documents not been made available to me. It's very important to have accurate records for response times. The calls for service and how people respond to are one of the key matrices for a fire department. And the fire department has on its website data on a chart, a little chart over there saying, here's what response times for each station. The fire department also has indicated that we're getting poor response times and they need to move fire stations because the traffic's gotten so heavy. And that's understandable. But to see the documents, that's of my curiosity, because I put similar public requests in the past together, and the department's gotten them to me. The City Attorney's Office has refused to cooperate by making these documents available to me. I had a very heated discussion 3 weeks ago with the City Attorney's Office. The documents still not been made available to me. Response time is very, very important. Other key questions: how many fire engines do we actually need to put out fire? We have approximately 2 fires a day. We have 8 fire trucks. 8 fire trucks plus 2 or 3 ladder trucks for 2 fires a day. Perhaps our resources need to be reallocated so we have ALS and BLS service vehicles available, so our fire department can respond to ALS and BLS service while staff is available to put out fires. Again, the City Attorney's Office made mistakes in 2021 and were unable to provide the documents for the fire department to apply for ALS and BLS services. Again, the City Attorney's Office could do a lot of better job in helping out the public, not just being such involved in self-service. So I'm somewhat concerned with the fact that the public documents are not being made available to the City Attorney's Office. The documents have been loaded out but not readable. So what's the purpose of having public documents? Requesting public documents if the City Attorney's Office refuses to make public documents available. Again, thank you for your time and just consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Stein. Because this is an unagendized item, we're unable to engage in any discussion, but staff will follow up with you. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers for items not on the agenda?
Chair Madrigal, there's no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, that will take us to item C1, the consent agenda for the minutes. And do we have any speakers for that item?
There's no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you. And have the members had an opportunity to review the minutes and suggest any changes or additions?
Nope.
No? No? Okay, a motion would be in order.
Move to approve.
Second.
Madam Clerk, we have a motion by Member Madrigal and a second by Mayor Zaragoza. If you can just do a roll call, please, because I don't think they switch our polling devices around.
No, it's working.
Member Madrigal,
Aye.
Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Chair McDonald,
Yes,
motion passes 3-0.
thank you very much. Take us to item D, reports, and we have 4 items on D, and I'm gonna take them a little bit out of order. I'm gonna do D1 first, then I'll move to D4, and then we'll come back to Mr. Ramirez for D2 and D3. So for item D1, this is the police department. There was a pre-recorded presentation pursuant to Measure M. And the recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, and Housing and Development Committee recommend that City Council approve and authorize the execution of an agreement with Phoenix Group Information Services, also known as the Phoenix Group, for the next 3 years with a total agreement amount not to exceed $810,000 for parking citation processing, administrative citation processing, and alarm management services. And Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers on this item?
Chair McDonald, there's no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Do the committee members have any questions of our police department representative?
I have just one question on the item number 5 here is the chief or whoever, on the false alarms, you know, and this is talking more in the personal end of it. I have once in a while set off my alarm and I go back and reset it, and I got a false alarm ticket on it. I wonder what, how come, you know, it's I set it, you know, and it went up supposedly, and then I went back and reset it before, you know, the alarm people call me up and I get my code and the whole thing, and I still get a little a notice on that. Is that normal or?
That's a good question, Mayor. What occurs is you're allowed so many false alarms, and as long as your alarm company verifies that it was a false alarm prior to the police response, then it is canceled and it should not go against you.
Yeah, normally, you know, they call me up, you know, probably within seconds, you know, and you give the code, you know, and then it's okay, you know. But I did get it happened, but I did get a little yellow, not yellow. I think it's red or orange type. I just wondered maybe that one might have been
That was probably a situation where maybe you weren't home or something that triggered the alarm when you weren't at the residence and it wasn't canceled in time.
and potentially maybe I should qualify that it was when we had the Santa Ana winds, you know.
Yes, that happens. And that's why it was placed in the ordinance to give a number of warnings to residents prior to getting the fines.
It works. Thank you.
Madrigal, any questions?
No real questions. I probably get that false alarm maybe once every 2 years. Just a quick aspect of it, or just maybe even if it's on topic, you can answer. If not, then it's fine. Realistically, keeping up with the yearly fee for people who have the house alarms. About how often, like, are people behind, or sometimes for whatever reason, people may get charged again, even though they probably paid maybe a month or so ago.
Are you talking about the annual alarm fee, or are you talking
Yeah,
about charging them for a
the-
response?
The annual alarm fee.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
35, yeah.
No, I know it's about like 35.
Yeah. Mhm.
Good evening. I was part of the development of the ordinance 3 years ago on this. So your question is, how many people do their payments cross with the expiration?
Sure.
I found that to be very rare. I've seen a couple of cases like that, but when that does happen, we make sure that that is rectified.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, so Chief, so the $270,000 annually is utilized for code compliance and animal safety and so forth too. It's not just.
Correct. So this contract brings all the civil citations, which are the ones also issued by animal safety or code, under one vendor. So it's not operating in different silos.
And potentially, I think the citation, when they get a citation, it goes to them also.
Yes, exactly. So if code compliance issues a citation, this company will process that citation. If it comes from animal safety, the same, or from PD. And largely speaking, the civil citations coming from PD are relatively fewer compared to those from code compliance as well. But the benefit of this is it's one vendor that processes all of those. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
That's it.
Anything else? I don't have any questions. I will move the recommended action.
Chair McDonald,
Yes, ma'am.
there are no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Second, but I apologize if I didn't. Oh,
Second,
okay, I made the motion. Mayor Zaragoza made the second. Just a roll call, please.
Chair McDonald,
Yes.
Member Zaragoza,
yes.
Member Madrigal,
Aye.
motion passes 3-0.
Thank you very much. We're gonna go a little bit out of order and go to item number 4, the fire department. Subject is award of agreement for fire department annual wellness exams. And the recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee recommends City Council approve the mayor to sign an agreement with a vendor to provide annual wellness exams for the fire department at the completion of the evaluation or proposals that are currently underway. And pursuant to Measure M, there was a pre-recorded message on the city's YouTube channel. And I'll ask if the committee has any questions for the fire chief.
The exams and then are guided by the National Fire Protection Association. Is that standard with them, Chief?
Correct. So they set a minimum standard for what these medical evaluations should contain. Within this agreement, we're going to go a little bit further. So we're taking best practices from the Firefighter Cancer Support Network, as well as the International Association of Firefighters and the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Have what's known as the Wellness Fitness Initiative, and so they actually update a little bit more often than NFPA does. So we're going a little bit above and beyond the NFPA's recommendations in this.
And Mr. Chair, I understand, Chief, this is a pretty extensive exam and focuses on early detection of diseases, cancers, and other type of diseases, to which I think is very significant, I think.
Correct. One of the things we're actually changing this, the two big changes we're looking to make with this agreement, because this is something that we've been doing for a number of years. One is not to have our staff waiting in a waiting room at a doctor's office for these medical evaluations. Obviously, with COVID, that became problematic, and so these evaluations will actually be done in the back of the fire station.
Oh.
Second thing we're actually going to be doing is we're adding ultrasound testing of the major organs for our firefighters. Because we recently had a case where a firefighter was given a clean bill of health from his medical evaluation, and 6 weeks later he was diagnosed with kidney cancer. And so having this ultrasound evaluation will hopefully pick up more of those things earlier, so they're much easier to treat.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions?
No questions.
And Madam Clerk, just confirm we have no speakers.
Chair McDonald, there's no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure of the committee.
Move approval of this item. Mr.
Second.
Chair.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Member Madrigal,
Aye.
Chair McDonald,
Aye.
motion passes 3-0.
Thank you very much. That'll take us to item D2, which is the Housing Department. And the subject is revisions to the City of Oxnard Inclusionary and Housing Ordinance. Recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing, and Community Development Committee direct staff on 7 individual policy questions described in the report related to potential revisions of the City of Oxnard Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. And I do show we have 2 speakers that are going to call in, Mr. Clyde Reynolds and Mr. Mark Ross. And we also have Ms. Barbara Macri Ortiz in person. So if we can do the online speakers first, and then we'll move to the other speaker. Sorry, Mr. Stein, I do have your speaker card too.
Chair McDonald, we have Mark Ross.
Okay, Mr. Ross, go ahead, please. You have 3 minutes.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. As a market rate developer, we are in full support of inclusionary zoning, and we happily participate in the process. Our concern has become the inconsistency between proposed inclusionary zoning ordinances and state density law. And it becomes quite confusing often and difficult to plan projects when the density bonus law at the state level conflicts with the city level. And we would just like to encourage the city to consider working with the developers and the state to create a program that is consistent and easily followed. We know that some of the overlays in the city have different requirements than other parcels in the city. And we think that if we could apply inclusionary zoning, local inclusionary zoning to projects which do not utilize state density law, makes a lot of sense. But with regard to state density bonus law, it would be much easier for us and for the city, and I think more productive, if we can come up with a way to make them not be conflicted with each other and allow us to move forward on projects and provide more affordable housing for the city. Again, we enjoy working with the city. We enjoy the process and are very supportive of including affordable housing in all our projects. So I appreciate the time and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And Madam Clerk, do we have Clyde Reynolds on the phone at all?
Chair McDonald, Clyde Reynolds is not available in person or virtually.
Okay, we'll wait and see if he calls in, but while we're waiting, we'll take Mr. Larry Stein next.
Good evening, members of the committee, members of the public, and the audience. I'm somewhat concerned about the housing density and these rules for affordable housing. I submitted public record requests back in January and December as it pertains to a particular project, Teal Club specific plan, and this also relates to housing bonuses and affordable housing. The projected cost of new housing in Oxnard is approaching $600,000 to $700,000 per house for a standard 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom house. That's not affordable. Where is it going to come down with $140,000 to make it affordable? I was campaigning before. The concept of affordable housing means that perhaps the city should become the landlord. The city should buy up the land and have the housing built so the city can rent out the homes so people can afford to live in the homes. People can't afford to live in $700,000 homes with making $20 an hour. So as we talk about housing bonuses, we need to look at what's actually affordable to local residents. not to out-of-towners who would come in because the property's nice and they can afford it, but residents who work in the fields and work in our factories who are making $20 and $30 an hour sometimes can't afford these homes. So let's redefine affordable as being actually affordable to the people who live here in town, not some guideline based upon $90,000 per year when people aren't making $90,000 a year. So again, when you use the term affordable housing, make it affordable to people who actually can afford to work and live in the city and not have housing built that becomes affordable to out-of-towners because the people working in the city can't afford to buy the homes that they're paying taxes on to support the city government that aren't providing the houses for them. Again, another issue has to deal with something that was talked on the agenda in the campaign is a ceiling right now on landlords, a rent increase ceiling of 4%. Landlords have to make money. Landlords have to pay for repairs. When you have a 4% cap on your rental housing, how is that affordable to the landlord, to the homeowner, to the landlord? Many of these landlords are one or two people who own one or two houses. If that, some will own a lot larger number of complexes in hundreds. But again, if you're capped at 4% and construction costs, repairs and maintenance has gone up 200%, where's the equity in that? I'd like to have that item addressed with this committee sometime in the future. Thank you much for your time and just consideration.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Barbara McCree-Ortiz, please.
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. First, I just want to apologize for getting my letter in so late. It's just been really rough lately. I'm not really sure what the developer was referring to with respect to state density bonus law in terms of a conflict. I think it may be the manner in which you figure out the housing costs, and there is something in the proposal here to try to get them being the same. The idea to say, well, just go by density bonus law, don't look at inclusionary, doesn't really respond to what the needs are. The needs of our community are getting worse and worse. And I'm just seeing it more and more and more. You know, what I hadn't realized is that HCD now recognizes that there is acutely, what do they call it? Acutely not affordable. And they've actually cut off or cut out a portion of our community that's from 0 to 15% of median and treating them now as a group because our prices have got so high. And on the West County, you got to understand is that the median income of this county does not reflect Western Ventura County and certainly does not reflect Oxnard. So we're talking about big chunks of people that are trying to make a living in this town. You know, I think Mr. Stein was talking about a $20 an hour wage. A $20 an hour wage is at 2,000 hours is 40,000 a year. And that's like not even half of, that would be an extremely low income. You have to take things in perspective in terms of what people are making and also what is available. I've tried to really think about the proposal, and I would really like to be in dialogue with the city housing staff to try to iron out some things. But the one thing that is critical is the amount that is subject to inclusionary has got to go up. 15% doesn't cut it. It simply doesn't cut it. I think a bare bones would be at 20. And at 20, you can model and structure the ordinance in a way which would be much better. But you have to start there because you got to look at the only way really to address our obligation to affirmatively further fair housing is through inclusionary. And so if we keep the bar real low, we're just ignoring it. And I think that was our strategy, was to try to use inclusionary to address this affirmatively furthering of fair housing. But we have to get the number, the percentage up to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Madam Clerk, the other call-in speaker is not showing up yet.
Chair McDonald, no. And we have no additional speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, and there was a pre-recorded message or presentation pursuant to Measure M on the city's YouTube channel, but we're going to do a little differently tonight because of the complexity of this issue. And the recommendation is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing, and Community Development Committee direct staff on 7 individual policy questions described in the report related to potential revisions to the City of Oxnard Inclusionary Housing Ordinance. And what we'll do is Mr. Ramirez has a very abbreviated presentation, and we will address each item individually, take comments, provide them to Mr. Ramirez. And then when we're done, we will deliberate on the entire package. That's what we're going to do. So Mr. Ramirez, it's up to you.
Thank you, sir. Just waiting for the remote. I apologize for the delay. Thank you, sir. Emilio Ramirez, Housing Director. I'm happy to be in front of you to advance this work. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge that with us is the Community Development Department staff, Kathleen and Jasmine and Heather, who are with the Advanced Planning Unit in Community Development, also the Housing Department staff, Albert, who is here, and Elsa, who was not able to make it today. All of us contributed to the staff report and the continuing work in trying to revise the ordinance. Most of all of us are here in case we need a team effort to answer a question. We are in front of you after almost a year's worth of community outreach, seeking to amend the local inclusionary housing ordinance. And we've gotten significant amount of feedback from, oh, that's not the right one. Okay, so we got a significant amount of feedback from the community in terms of things that we should change in the inclusionary ordinance. There are some things that are at consensus that we believe, although and some of the public comment that was mentioned today maybe leads to a different perspective. But you can see on the screen some of the things that we think that we are consensus and not necessarily seeking additional direction. That notwithstanding what was mentioned by Mrs. McCurtis just a little while ago, increasing the inclusionary requirement from 10 to 15%, increasing the affordability term from 20 years to 55 years for rental projects, and then making a small change in the ordinance where the affordable units are proportionate to what's built out. We have 7 questions in specific that we are looking for the committee's feedback on and direction, and we will go back and amend the ordinance and come back before the Planning Commission and the Council seeking final adoption of the ordinance. You can see on screen those 7 questions, but I'm going to go through them one by one instead of in this way. So I'll just go through each question and then we can ask for the feedback at the end of each slide. So there's 7 slides, 1 per question. There might be 7 slides. The first question is the number of units within a development that would trigger the requirement to comply with the inclusionary ordinance. Right now, as it is, the current ordinance requires that there be an inclusionary compliance when the development is 10 units or larger. And so we're asking whether the committee would support the staff recommendation that it be reduced from 10 units to 6 units. The reason that it is at 6 units, when we spoke to the community and to the development community and to the residential community, business community, there was quite a bit of thought exchange leading towards this recommendation. some keeping it at 10, some reducing it to 1 unit. We're at 6 units because at 6 units, it requires 0.6 units to be built, therefore rounding up to 1 unit. And so below that, it would require less than 1 unit. And we don't think that it is viable to produce an inclusionary requirement at below the 5 units. In the case of some community perspective, they wanted at a single unit to be built, and we just didn't think it was viable for, say, a person that was building their own home. Then that person would still be compliant. So the city is recommending, the city staff is recommending that trigger point be reduced from 10 to 6. And at 6 units, the developer have an obligation to either produce 1 unit or pay the in lieu fee. So I'm going to stop there and solicit your opinion, your advice.
Okay, so the first question is, do we drop the trigger point from 10 to 6%? Mayor?
And what's that's gonna do, provide more affordable housing, is that?
At 6, yes, we
Yeah.
think so. We think that there would be more opportunity for units to be built.
Mhm. And then Amelia says this is for rental and for sale units.
That's correct.
Mhm. But that'll give us more affordability, more homes anyway.
In neither case, whether the developer actually produces the unit or pays the in lieu fee, the in lieu fee would then be used to produce other affordable housing somewhere else.
Can I share something on, Mr. Chair? So consequently, staff went through all 7 of these items or potential recommendations. And this is the recommendations that that staff is recommending to the committee to potentially then recommend it to the city council.
In this case, that's correct, yes, but not in every case do we have
Recommendation.
a concrete recommendation like this, and we're asking for your feedback.
And is that unique to Oxnard to lower to 6 units, or have others?
It's not unique. There are a number of cities that are that low. In fact, there are some that are lower. We are finding that the average case, in average cases, it is around 10 units. But we have seen a variety of jurisdictions that go as low as 1 and go much higher as well.
Interesting. Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Member Montreal, any questions?
One quick question. I understood what you said. Key thing, what would be the difference between 5 and 6? Simply because at 5 you would still round up to 1.
That's correct. No real difference. That is the logic that we came up with. At 6 is 0.6 and therefore 1 unit.
Yeah, but at 5 it would be 0.5 and it's still
That's
1 unit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes?
No, I just wanted, because, yeah. Yeah, that's all.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's all.
Okay, so the request is, do we lower it to 5, do we lower it to 6, or do we leave it at 10?
So staff's recommending 6, right?
We're recommending 6, and as Councilman Madrigal mentioned, there isn't much of a difference between 5 and 6, and the reason it is at 6 is because it is at 0.6 units and therefore 1 unit. I mean, that's the logic as it is.
I don't have any problems with that. 6.
Sounds like the recommendation is going to be for 6%. Are you okay
6.
with that, council member?
Oh, yeah, well, majority rules.
Okay.
Okay, so that'll be our first recommendation is 6%.
Mhm.
And it's 6 units, just to be clear, the percentage is how many they have.
This is units, not percent.
Units is the trigger point in this one, correct, Emilio?
The question in this case, yes, the question in this case is how big does the development have to be in order for the inclusionary ordinance to trigger? In this case, 6 units. Okay. The next question is, what should be the level of affordability for rent and for sale developments? So if in one of the opening slides, I mentioned that the staff and the community and et cetera had consensus that the percent of affordability in a development be increased from 10 to 15%. So let's say in the case of 100 unit development, 15 of those units would be affordable. This question is, how do we break up that that 15 units? Where right now it requires 10% or 10 of 100. And in a for rent product, 5 of those 10 need to be for very low households, and the other 5 need to be for low households or low income households. And in a for sale product, all 10 of those units need to be for low income households. So the staff is recommending that in the current case where you'd be 15 of 100, having increased it from 10, that 1/3 or 5 of the 15 units be made affordable to a very low income household, and the other 2/3 or 10 of the 15 be made available to a low income household. That is for a for rent product. In the case of a for sale, there is a question at issue, and we are asking for your feedback in one of 2 options that the staff is presenting. A, should all of the 15 units in a 100-unit development be made available or affordable to moderate income households, and nothing affordable to another income level, i.e. low income or very low, etc. The other alternative is in a for sale product where 15 of 100 are affordable, should 5 of them or 1/3 be available to low income households and the other 10 to moderate income households. And therein lies the question in this case. In a for rent, we are in agreement. In a for sale, we're asking for your feedback between all moderate income or split between low and moderate or some other version thereof. So that is the question at issue number 2.
So 5 of the 15 would be affordable.
No, we're in a for rent. First of all, for rent, all 15 are affordable, but 5 of the 15 for very low, and 10 of the 15 for low. In a 100-unit development, 5 units are for very low, and 10 units are for low.
Oh, got you.
Okay.
Yeah.
In a 100-unit for sale development, there's 2 options. One, all 15 units be for moderate income, or 5 of those 15 be for low and 10 of them be for moderate income. There's 2 options in a for sale product.
So if I can recommend that I think we need consensus on what was an assumption on our part, and that going from 10 to 15%, which is what we heard from the community. But as you heard from Mrs. Macro-Ortiz, she's recommending a higher percentage, but that cascades through a number of our questions here. So if we can maybe pause for a moment and get consensus on the overall percentage of a project. The current ordinance requires 10% at the triggering of 10 units, and you provide 10% of the units at varying levels of affordability. Staff, and with much consensus from the development community and residents, was to increase that to 15%, which is what question 2 is based on. But if we can pause and get direction from the council, if you're supportive of the 15% as the threshold, or if you're looking for that percentage to be higher, that would be helpful.
Is that staff recommendation?
Staff's recommendation is for a 15%.
15%. And it's been studied back and forth.
There is a state law that allows an inclusion ordinance to exist. And that state law indicates that if it is at 15% or below, then the state does not have to review the local ordinance. If it is above 15%, then the state must review and approve the local ordinance.
Gotcha. Okay.
Member Madrigal, any comments?
Are we doing everything all together right now, or are we just focusing on the rental right now?
I think we're going back to the
Or just the 15%?
15%.
Okay. Yeah, so you said that if anything above 15 goes to the state for state approval. If we were to go that route, I'm not saying we will, but if we did, about how long of a process would that be? 1, for the state to complete, and 2, about how much staff time would that be?
I don't know how long it would be in order for HCD to respond to their review. I can definitely assess that. Staff time to simply ask the question would be fairly easy, and we would just wait for their response. Part of the review depends on our level, the city's level of compliance with the housing element and et cetera. We are in compliance. So I'm not sure exactly how long it would take them to review. I can't imagine too long.
And just as a aside and related to the staff's recommendation for 15, there was a program adopted within the housing element that has a 20% on certain projects. So we do have varying levels, and then often a density bonus is stacked on top of this. So in many projects, we're getting above the standard 10% that we have today because of the other tools that the developers have out there. I mean, some of the projects are 100% affordable. It just depends on what funding sources they're going through. So we felt that this recommendation, and this did come up during the establishment of the in lieu fee discussion in the housing element, a lot of comments were made about wanting to increase that level of affordability from, the percentage of affordable units on a project to a higher, but through this last round of meetings with the developers and the residents, this seemed to be kind of the tipping point to test the waters with all the other incentive programs that just came out as part of our housing element and all the different laws that are changing at the state level. The option is also to go back and amend it later. You can incrementally go up and see how it works. And if, we're not getting a lot of pushback or people are still building the units instead of applying for the in lieu, I mean, maybe the market's there to go to a higher, but just trying to give you some context of how we landed on 15%
So
of
you
their
can work with that. Okay.
Okay, so the minimum is 10, staff's recommending 15. Ms.
15.
Macri Ortiz has asked us to consider 20. So what would be the pleasure of the committee in terms of a recommendation?
I would go with it 15%.
15%, member?
Fine.
15%, okay. So that'll be the recommendation on that one.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, committee members. So now back to the question on screen. Now that there is consensus that it be at 15%, then the allocation of level of affordability amongst that 15% is what is in question in number 2. So in a for rent product, 5 of the 15 units would be available to very low income households, and the other 10 of the 15 units would be available to low income households. That's for rent. In a for sale product, there are 2 options. Sorry.
Let's let them just go through the for rent question and then handle the for sale side separately, please.
So 5% would be for the low income and 10% for the very low income.
No, the other way around.
The
The
other
other way
way
around, okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm okay
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Great.
with that particular. Okay,
So the recommendation will be 10% or 5% for very low income and 10% for low
That is
income.
the staff
correct?
recommendation, yes.
yeah, yes, okay.
That'll
that
be
what
our
you're-
recommendation.
Okay.
Yes.
So then in a for sale product, the question now is amongst those 15 units of 100 unit developments, should all of them be available to a moderate income household? Or should there be a split amongst the 15 where maybe 5 units are available to a low income household and 10 units are available to a moderate income household, or some other version between the 2?
I would go with a split.
You would go with
Yeah.
split? Okay. Member Madrigal?
Quick question. I know, whichever route, we go, I think will be fine, or not necessarily, apples and oranges, but key question I have, if we go with the split and, obviously as any developer, will try to get as much of a profit as possible. What would that do to the price of just, the rest of the units? That'd be a higher price, that'd be, it just,
No.
or just basic economics of what the situation is at the particular time.
So first of all, I would like to mention that the current situation, the current market, the cost of producing the home is more expensive than the controlled price points of selling it to a low income household. Okay, so there is not just a opportunity loss in profit, but there is an actual loss in cost. So that's one consideration. However, That controlled price point will not have an effect on the market condition or the marketability of the balance of the homes for monitor for market condition. So those will continue to sell at the same market rates that the price that the market would demand. And they wouldn't change in scale or in design or in scope or anything like that. They all look exactly the same. But the real consideration is the cost versus price points. At moderate income, it is just barely above the cost of producing the homes. So while they don't make us much money, they still don't lose any.
Okay, real quickly, I know, just for a little bit of context, for a family of 4, low income is a little over 100,000, right?
No, for a family of 4, the low income, the price point control for a low income person is 80% to the area median income.
Which is 100,350. Yeah, Yeah.
Yes.
because it's up on the City of Thousand Oaks website. That's where I'm getting the numbers from. Yeah, it's the county one. So, and then for, you said moderate income is 138,500 for a family of 4. Yeah, right?
Both of those
Can you
numbers
give
are
me 1
correct.
second, please?
Yeah.
So Councilman Madrigal, with the income earnings there, is that leading to a different recommendation on a split of the level of affordability within a for sale project?
No, not necessarily, just more like context, like for everyone or anyone might be listening at home, or for future, if anyone goes back to this meeting, it's just that, it is, a pretty penny that what people are making, and it's still, affordable housing.
So the answer is no, sir. The chart that you're looking at identifies the eligible buyer for that home.
Right.
That's $100,000. However, the method of calculating the controlled price is as against 92,320. It's 80% of 115,000. And that's 92,320, not 100,350.
So if I make 100,000, I have family, I have 2 kids, and I make 100,000, I'm screwed then.
No, if you have a household of 4, and you make 100,000, then you are eligible to buy this low income home. My point is that the price point that is set as against a lower income level. It is 92,320, which means that you, as a $100,000 household, can better afford this home.
At 92.
And you are eligible to buy it.
That's great news. Where do I get all these numbers from? On what website?
That's confusing because the website, the state website, and the website that you're looking at identifies the income limit of the eligible buyer. And that's why everywhere in the staff report, we're talking about the affordable housing cost, which is referencing 80% of the area median income, and not this chart, because this chart doesn't produce the affordable housing cost. There is a confusion for that. I apologize.
Could there possibly be a chart on the staff report when it goes to council?
I can clarify that, sure. Yes.
Which makes more sense.
I can make a new chart and present both charts and identify the distinction, sure.
Okay, perfect.
That's a good point, yeah. That's confusing the other way. Yeah.
But it is intentional on my part in the staff report to be referred to it as the affordable housing cost, because I am using 80% of the area median income, which is in fact on the chart of 115,400. That's the area median income. So that number of $100,000 is closer to around 93% of the area median income.
Okay, so the way I understand it, we're being asked to recommend whether one, we put all 15% into affordable moderate income housing set for sale, or do we split it 1/3, 2/3 for low moderate income housing and 2/3 for moderate income housing?
Or any combination
recommendation.
thereof. I mean, if there's another recommendation, that's option D on there, any other combination that you would recommend.
And Mary, you said you're okay with the
Yeah.
split?
Okay.
Councilmember?
I'm fine.
Okay, that'll be our recommendation then is for C.
There is. So the next question is asking, in a for sale unit, should the local ordinance require an equity share agreement that is consistent with the state density bonus law and a 45-year term consistent with another state law, AB 2011? So
We're talking number 3, right?
the third question, yes.
Yeah.
So, but for context,
Yeah.
right now the inclusionary ordinance requires what we call a resale restriction agreement, and that resale restriction agreement has a 20-year term. What happens is that during that 20-year period, whenever the homeowner sells their home, that subsequent sale is controlled. That price is controlled. We set it from the housing department to ensure that at that subsequent transaction, it is still affordable to the income level that it needs to be affordable to, in this case, low income. Okay, so we define subsequent transactions. That is a 20-year resale restriction. The state density bonus law imposes what's called an equity share agreement. And in the state density bonus law, there is not a term to that equity share agreement. So what happens is that at the initial transaction from the developer to the homeowner, the staff controls the price point. But from that point forward, the subsequent sale is not price controlled. Instead, the homeowner is allowed to accumulate equity appreciation. And that equity appreciation is then shared with the city. So we recapture a portion of the initial investment, initial price points, and the equity that's been appreciated. And that equity share that we capture from that transaction, we reinvest in production of other affordable housing. Okay, so that's the state density bonus law.
And what is the percentage of the share
It depends on how long it's been.
after the 20 years?
So it's 50%. We calculate the initial investment,
Yeah.
and that's dependent. And then the equity appreciation on top of that initial investment is split 50%.
Gotcha.
Okay. There is another law, AB 2011, which amongst the two state laws, there is inconsistency. And that state law requires similar to our resale restriction. So it continues to be affordable, but they impose a 45-year term instead of a 20-year term. But it's not equity share. So what the staff is recommending is a combination of the two laws, two state laws. Number one, that we impose an equity share restriction versus our existing resale restriction, but that we impose a 45-year term to that equity share, which means that if the single homeowner bought it today from the developer, lived in it for 45 years, in the 46th year, then that equity share is matured and it's no longer. So if they sell it in the 46th year, they keep all the appreciation, and it's no longer affordable to anyone else.
As opposed to the 20.
As opposed to the 20, or as opposed to the life equity share restriction for the initial transaction.
And 2011 has that stipulation, the 45-year.
AB 2011 requires a 45-year agreement, but it is in the form of similar to the resale restriction versus the equity share restriction.
So after 45 years, it's theirs.
After 45 years, then it's theirs, and they can sell it or do anything they want. Right now, in the city ordinance, it's 20 years. So after 20 years, that homeowner is free and clear of any obligation.
And you said that then you want to combine that.
So we're looking to go to an equity share model where that model has a 45-year term.
Interest, okay. That's your recommendation.
That is the staff's recommendation. And so we're seeking your feedback. Number one, should it be an equity share? And if it is an equity share, should there be a term? Or do we stay with the resale restriction and change the term?
So, Mr. Chair, so within the 45 years, if we do, what happens if they sell it the 30th year? If they want to sell it.
The city recaptures the initial investment, which we have to calculate, and then we calculate the equity appreciation between the initial transaction and those 30 years. And then we split that equity in two, and we get half and they get half.
So they're not losing anyway, regardless of.
They're not going to lose. They should recapture some equity appreciation, although not the full amount that they.
But it gives affordability for 45 years.
It allows us to do two things. Number one, have a restriction, an agreement on the books for 45-year period, which we can then indicate that we have such an affordable unit for that period of time. Number two, in some people's opinions, mine included, equity appreciation is amongst the basics of owning a home. That's why you own a home. It's for the ability to appreciate equity. And so if you've complied with that and you lived in the home, the family home for 45 years, then at the 46th year, you're completely free and clear of any obligation. You decide to sell it, you appreciate the entire equity. So it's a reward for having matured out that agreement.
One quick other question. How about the maintenance during those 45 years? If a house needs a roof or needs painting and so forth?
The homeowner is fully responsible. The homeowner is fully responsible.
Okay.
Emilio, what happens if I buy the home, I have the agreement, but I sell it at year 3?
No, good point.
If the homeowner sells it at any time during the equity share, then we do two things. Number one, we figure out the initial investment. And number two, we figure out the equity appreciation between the original execution of that equity share agreement and the transaction. And then we figure out 50% of that, and we retain 50% of the equity appreciation and the homeowner keeps it. The more significant point relative to affordable housing is that unit is no longer affordable. That unit is on the open market and for sale at open market conditions.
Gotcha. Okay. So the staff recommendation, Mr. Chair, is 45 years.
Staff recommends that we move from a resale restriction to an equity share restriction and that it have a 45-year term.
Don't we have some that are 50 years now or in the past?
I'm sorry?
50, did we have 50?
There are a myriad of requirements, whether they're from funding sources or home has different requirements, CDBG has different requirements. They're just all over the place.
Okay, thank you.
So the point that I was trying to get Emilio to say there is it does take those units offline. So there is a pro and a con. In this case, the city would get back money that they could then reinvest in other affordable housing projects. The owner gets to gain some equity share that they can reinvest in something else. But the benefit of the resale agreement that we have right now is it truly guarantees a length of time that we know something's going to be affordable. In this case, it's currently 20. That could be increased to something else, but you have this clear picture of how long each unit until it falls off the affordability. Here, it could be really somebody turns around and sells it the next year. It comes out of your inventory of affordable housing when that happens. There are other benefits of that, but I just want to make sure that
and that's important, yeah.
That's the important piece here in terms of an equity share versus a resale. The terms is secondary to that of how long. So hopefully that provided some clarity.
I guess my only question would be, how do we make sure that, let's say we go with the 45-year model and in year 20, the current owner sells it. How do we make sure that we're notified of a pending sale? Because I think in the past, those have sometimes fallen through the cracks and we've lost out on that.
It shouldn't. We record a document against a deed restriction against the property.
That's right.
And in order for that transaction to occur, the escrow has to satisfy that deed restriction. So they come to us and they ask us what do they need to do in order to satisfy it, and we send them a bill.
Okay, so we're going to follow the title.
So that would, yes, it would happen at title transaction if it's an equity share. If it is a resale restriction, what we do is when we get that initial phone call, we do the calculation and we figure out what the controlled resale price must be, and we impose that control resale price. And so we say you cannot sell it for more than this much, and you have to sell it to an eligible buyer who has this much income requirement.
And then that could be in a condition between escrow and title.
Well, if it is a resale restriction, it happens at a lot earlier because
But they bring it up.
the home seller, the homeowner, the seller is trying to identify how much they can sell it for.
I think
Mr. Dewitt, I'm not sure if he's cheering for a football team or.
No, I'd like to add a question. Is it, and this is in regard to Ms. Golden's comments about the risk of losing the affordable units out of our inventory. Could we do a blend where it's, for example, the first 20 years is a sale restriction, and then the next 20 or 25 years is the equity restriction?
Absolutely.
Could we do a blend? Then we assure the inventory lasts for at least a couple decades or some number there, 20 years, 25 years. And after that, then the equity restriction kicks in so that the homeowner has some flexibility. But we also have some more certainty about how many years it stays in the affordable inventory. So maybe that's an option for the committee to consider.
That's a good point.
We can definitely, I'm sorry, we can definitely do a blend. I should mention though, that if we do that, we would be, that I know of, we would be the only jurisdiction that is doing that. And so there would be an inconsistency with the state law or the various state laws.
So we call it the new and.
But there is an inconsistency now, and we point that out in our staff report that our underlining goal here isn't necessarily to be consistent with state law. It's to do what's right for Oxnard. And this is a place within your inclusionary that you are able to be different from that. I mean, even in Barbara's letter, I mean, she has a different recommendation about the equity share agreements should only be for those that are truly on the density bonus, and a recommendation that they both be for 55 years, not 45. So there's many combinations within here of figuring out what is the right thing for Oxnard.
Does the new one proposal conflict with the 2011?
To some extent, yes, in terms of the kind of agreement that it is. In the 2011, it is more like a resale restriction. I think Ms. Golden makes an excellent point, and that is what is, without considering the state law. And I say that because the state law itself is inconsistent. There's no way to be consistent with the state law. Okay, so maybe that doesn't matter. And maybe what does matter is what is right to do locally. And so there are some considerations. Number one, what is the real purpose and objective behind home ownership? Equity appreciation, allowing a person to accumulate that wealth in their own home. I mean, I think that's a significant thing.
Absolutely.
Or ensuring that home or the price, the mortgage that a person pays is affordable. That is also significantly important. It changes relative to when you have a resale restriction. Oftentimes, like in 2008 during the Depression and et cetera, oftentimes a resale restriction causes the home to be upside down and they simply can't sell it. Okay, they come to I've done it. I don't know how many times they come to my office. We figure out what the resale restriction price is going to be, and it's below what they owe, and they just are stuck.
Yeah.
You good?
Yep. I'm good.
Member Montreal, any other questions?
I just have one, say, example, we do lock into this 45-year agreement, and give or take, it's a struggle as with anything else in life. And whoever the homeowner is decides, you know what, it's hard, I can barely afford this, so I'm gonna go move in with this other person and I'm gonna use this house for rent because technically I have it for 45 years, can't sell it. They may not necessarily want to share their capital gains, so it just becomes a rental.
Actually, both the equity share and the resale restriction require that they be owner occupied.
No, I understand that, but like how, realistically, are we gonna enforce that, or,
I mean, admittedly, we have to catch them, and so that's a challenge. But when we do catch them, we enforce it pretty heavily, and it has worked. But there's got to be 1,000 houses out there.
Well,
that-
of course, yeah, that's why I bring it up.
There's no capital gains for owner occupied. No capital gains for owner. When they sell.
When they sell, yes.
Yeah. At one time, there were mortgages that went up from 30 to 40 years for
Right.
affordability. And I think that's probably where 2011 came from.
The 45, 55-year split between ownership and rental is fairly common. It's a pretty common scheme in California, redevelopment law, and it's all over the place.
Thank you.
And the equity sale agreement would require that they be the resident of the house for the term of the equity.
Yes, they
The
have to be
equity
owner
agreement.
occupied during their term of ownership.
So it's not like they can buy it and then after 2 years rent it out and make a profit and move somewhere else. That would be prohibited.
But you lose it, right? If you rent, right? I don't know.
Good point, sir. Could a person figure out a way to sell it to themselves and then get out of the equity, pay back the equity share, and then put it back on the open market as a for rent? I'm sure that there's someone out there that's smart and can figure it
Well,
out.
I just want to make sure that if we're doing something to try and benefit the people that need it the most,
That's true.
that they don't circumvent that system and do something that they shouldn't be doing, because the idea is to make it affordable. And then if they rent it for an inflated rate, that doesn't seem fair.
I think I admittedly so. I think you're right. I think that the question comes down to one of two values. For the initial buyer who is low income or moderate income, do we impart upon them the benefits of home ownership, their equity appreciation? Or B, do we ensure long-term home ownership affordability? Okay, two different things. We can't have it both ways. So if the basic premise behind owning a home is accumulating that equity, and we essentially facilitate that basic premise to a low-income buyer at the beginning, then have we done our job? Some people would believe yes. And the other alternative is you have a home ownership condition, you make that affordable for long-term. So that's really the question between the decision between the question.
And you want long-term affordability because there's some people that rent for 30, 40 years and have nothing, for this way that at least they have a home and an equity eventually.
Sure.
That's something to think about. Okay.
What's the consensus of the committee,
I think
the
that,
staff recommendation? Or-
yeah, I would go with that.
Do you want us to explore another option that was presented from the back
The
table?
no-
Or are you ready to make a recommendation of supporting the staff recommendation?
I think we're recommending the equity share agreement proposed by staff.
Okay.
The fourth question is, should the local ordinance affordable housing cost calculator be changed to be consistent with the state density bonus law? And in this case, as well as AB 2011. So again, this is about the formula to define the affordable housing cost. It is not about the buyer who is eligible to buy that home. Okay, because that is the difference in this table versus 80% of the area median income. Okay, so as the current ordinance reads, the price point or the price point for either the rent that is paid or the price of the home is defined to be 30% of 80%. 80% of the area median income. I'm sorry, 30% of 80% of the area median income. Okay.
Of 120 or what?
So we take for a 4-person household, we identify the published area median income, which is 115,400 times 80% times 30%. Okay.
80% plus 30.
Times 80 times 30.
Times 30.
Okay. And then that becomes the affordable housing cost. And so we control both the rent or the mortgage, the price of the home, such that the mortgage is not above that limit, where the affordable housing cost in the state law, and in the local ordinance is different relative to the things that it includes. Maintenance, for example, is not included in our local ordinance, but is included in the state. So what we're asking is, well, in the case of the state law, for a for sale unit, for example, for a for sale for low income units, the affordable housing cost would be defined at 30% of 70%, where our ordinance says 30% of 80%. Okay, so we are recommending that we make the ordinance consistent with the state law. Here's a chart. Here's a chart,
which is 30% of 75 of 80.
right? So here's a.
Okay,
How do I do that?
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so anyways, the last two columns on the screen are the recommendations for that we're proposing. And you can see that for the extremely low, the low income, the low and the moderate income, we're trying to make them consistent with the state provisions. Where right now they're not. They're not by fairly small differences. But in a moderate condition, for a for sale is the column all the way to the right. So in a moderate condition, it'd be 35% of 110. And for those other 5 units that you just voted on, it would be 30% of 70%. Versus right now it's all 30 of 80. And then
So what number would that be? 30% of the for the low income? What amount would that be? Just for thinking purposes. That's
Thank God for calculating.
I know. I don't have my calculator, but
Emilio, is this the equation that we have in there where we say the for sale unit would be 239,000 and the eligible buyer's income
Yeah.
would be 92,350?
It has the wrong.
That's for 30% of 80. So the housing price for 30% of 80 would be set at 239,000 and the eligible buyer's income would be 92,350.
okay.
So the way that is done is that we would take 115,400 times 70% times 30%, and that makes a monthly mortgage that has to be up at not more than $209 or $2,019 a month. So then we calculate that that's the amount of cost that they are allowed to pay. So we back into that using the current interest rates and the HOA fees and the maintenance and the utility allowance and et cetera. And then we set the price point, which is the price point that Ms. Golden just mentioned, because we want to make sure that that price that they're paying is not more than $2,019.
So the monthly payment is affordable.
So the monthly payment is affordable.
Okay.
So we make it be at that point. If it was a moderate income, then it would just be 110. The area median income times 110 times 35%, and we have a price point, and then we calculate the mortgage on that price point.
You might be talking 3,000 a month or something like that.
It could be
Sometimes
it could be significant, yeah. But the difference between the low income and the moderate income is enough such that the moderate income price point is above the cost of production.
Gotcha. Okay. So that makes it affordable. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I have a question with the numbers. If, for example, mortgages, I don't know, we'll call it 2,300. If that ends up being more than 30% of the person's income, would that make them ineligible?
They can't afford.
No. So if the situation was that the person,
Because like, you know,
the
like,
person's income is much more low income than the maximum income, that it doesn't mean that they're ineligible to buy the home. It just means that they can't get the bank loan. So the bank is not going to approve them on the loan because they can't afford the
debt ratio,
the unit, right? So they would then be in a situation where even though it is affordable, they're still too low income to afford the home.
Yeah, so in other words, ineligible. So
Mhm.
I understand like if you're, under or whatever, over $200, $300, but what happens if you're like on the cusp? And instead of being 30, you're like 31 or 32%. So that means that, in other words, you're out, right?
That unfortunate
Okay.
scenario does happen. And therein lies the reason that there is this discrepancy between this chart and the affordable housing cost calculator. This chart allows
I think using these numbers actually hurts people closer to the edge.
yes, your point is valid, sure. And at some point, a person's gonna get stuck in being that close to the edge and it's not gonna qualify. But that's why the chart exists. That's why this discrepancy exists, in order to kind of allow for that discrepancy to not exist as much. But yeah, at the end of the day, that could very well happen, and it does happen.
So I'm just thinking out loud. So a developer would have to really work with us on that type of scenario, right? If they want to build, like for example, at the extremely low 30 and into moderate 35 by 110, the developer would have to work with us on that. If they want to play ball.
If a developer has a for sale product trying to sell to an extremely low income person, that's going to be tough, and
That's right.
it's going to be really, really hard to do. At this point, the desire to sell the home affordable to a low income household alone it doesn't pencil in today's market.
Yeah, but we got to make it affordable for our people to be able to buy or rent.
Sure, there is a greater ability to create affordability in a for rent market than it is in a for sale market. But that low income requirement that we just talked about in question 2 is going to be in today's world is going to be tough to do. And if the market dips, not that we want it to, but if it does, that low income condition will be easier to meet.
So staff is recommending the 30-30 and the 30-50, the 30-70.
Yeah, the last 2 columns.
Okay.
Just to see if we can, to make sure that I'm even understanding this here, when you go from the 30 to 80, which we're currently at for low,
Yes.
and you go to the 30 to 70, you're lowering that, in essence, will lower the sales price of the home, and it lowers the income eligible of the buyer.
No, it lowers the sales price of the home, yes, but it does not lower the income of the eligible buyer. The eligible buyer is set by this chart.
Okay.
So in the staff report, when it says then that if housing cost calculation of 30% of 70% of the area median income is used, then the low income sales price is $202,000, which before we were at 239. So it's gone down about $30,000. And the eligible buyer income is 80,780, where the previous, when we were looking at it being 30 of 80, it was at 92,350. So the eligible buyer income.
The eligible buyer income is not the same as the 70%.
Okay.
Is that, I don't know if that's the question you're asking.
Well, the price.
I'm just trying to help them understand the impact. What do they gain? What does our community gain by reducing from, or increasing, however you want to say that, from 30 to 80 to 30 to 70? Because that's really the only change within this chart. So what's the outcome of that change?
The outcome for a for sale unit is that the price of the home is reduced, in the example that is in the staff report, by approximately $30,000. The eligible buyer has not changed. The same family can buy the home, but the price point has been reduced to a smaller price.
The price of the home.
The price of the home. And for that matter, the price of the rent, if it's an apartment complex,
Right.
has been reduced to a smaller price. But the eligible person remains the same.
And Amelia, that's been a concern of a lot of developers when you lower the price of the home to
Sure.
some degree, to make it affordable.
Sure, especially in the current market, it's
Right.
tough. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so are you suggesting the last two columns?
I
be what we
do,
suggest?
yes.
Okay, member Montreal?
Mhm.
No,
No,
what would you suggest?
Probably keep it as is. But I think I'm gonna lose out, so.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear
Keep
what
it
you
as
said.
is, but I'm probably gonna lose out.
I'm sorry, but,
Keep it as is,
oh,
but I'm probably gonna lose out, so.
Okay, we're gonna be split on this one. It's gonna be
Yeah.
2-1 in terms of recommending that go to council.
Can I ask a question? Councilman, is your concern at all based on a for sale product versus a for rent product?
Well, actually, my biggest concern is actually, as when we originally started this meeting, it is, and the whole process is to help, for the most part, residents of our city of Oxnard. The median income, and I think we're helping community, but I honestly don't think that we're helping people outside of Oxnard first instead of people in Oxnard by going this route, because at the end of the day, the median income here in Oxnard is very, very low. It's nowhere near the whatever, even if you do the 92,000 for family of four, it's nowhere near that. So knowing that, I know that, and I get it, it's, money talks, so you're bringing in, you're bringing in new people, and that's great. You're bringing home ownership to the community as a whole. In California, we need housing regardless. At the same time, you're not helping, you might be helping me, but at the same time, I feel like I'm not helping my neighbor. My neighbor's gonna be in the same situation that they're currently in right now.
So in response to that, sir, the affordable housing calculator that is on screen is more helpful to the low income
Oh, no,
population
no,
in
no.
Oxnard than the current condition.
No, I understand that, but money talks. So, someone from, my buddy in Camarillo, my buddy in Thousand Oaks, my buddy in Ventura, see this, boom, they're gonna come buy that, that unit. So, money talks, they make whatever it can at the end of the day, then.
it's more of an affordability issue.
But that'll happen regardless, whether it's at 30% of 80% or 30%.
Oh, yeah, I understand that. I understand that.
Okay, so then we have a 2-1.
So,
Just one follow-up on that. Would that happen everywhere? Because it's set by the Ventura, it's set as a
No, no,
countywide number. So would that be true in Thousand Oaks? They would use the same, and Camarillo, Ventura, wherever is that? If it's a density bonus or a AB 211, that's already said. It would really just depend on how those cities would have inclusionary, if they would be calculating it the same as we are, where all the housing prices are just what they are, because we're all using the same area median income.
That is correct. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, I just like to add, I think actually what everyone's saying is actually a valid point, because what Councilmember Madrigal was saying is whatever happens here, the people most able to jump on a purchase are the ones that are going to get to the front of the line with regard to a bank. I think part of that's true everywhere, not just here. Because we're not able to, we're doing everything we can in terms of local public policy to help the situation, but we're not able to tell the developers that they can only sell or rent to Oxnard residents. That's unfortunately not legal. So there's a question of this that also has to do with ultimately some equilibrium between the balance between supply and demand. So what we're doing, it seems like the prices are still going to come in high. That's accurate. But at some point, as we get more units, then the economics of that will also start to flatten out the prices. So this is not just a race against the money, but also a race against time. And that's the conundrum that I think all California communities are in, especially those communities that are actually trying to be serious about providing affordable housing, because in the end, the economics still prevails. And I think that gets to the council member's point about money talks. It's both on the developers, the builders side, as well as on the purchaser side.
But Mr. Chair, I think that this scenario gives the abilities to some people that the potential of buying a home. Because otherwise, if you go with the 35 to 30 to 70, there's no way they're going to do it. But this way, at least they have an opportunity to potentially buy a home or rent at a lower rate.
The price is, at that point, the price is set, and admittedly, whoever can buy it, can buy it. I also should mention that the column right next to it is the for rent scenario, and that is the for rent scenario that is in the state laws. So in a low income condition, the staff recommendation also affects the for rent scenario. In that case, it would be 30% of 60%, versus 30% of 80, which is what the inclusionary ordinance currently states. And so both of those columns are in question on this question.
Okay, so we're still split 2-1, correct?
Okay. Okay, good.
Number 5.
Number 5.
So the next question is about paying the in lieu fee. The inclusionary ordinance right now allows a developer to pay in a fee, which we call the in lieu fee, instead of actually building the units. So they can escape the requirement to produce the units by paying the in lieu fee. That in lieu fee, you may remember, went to council, and depending on the product type, ranges from $28,000 to $36,000 per unit in the development. So if it's a 100-unit development, $36,000 is $3.6 million, right? Yeah. And so the current ordinance requires that in order to pay the in lieu fee, that the developer presented to the city council for the city council to approve the payment of the in lieu fee instead of producing the unit. Staff is recommending that the developer not have to go to council, but instead that the payment of the in lieu fee is authorized by the staff. In this case, it would be a pretty standard black and white, yes or no. No real discretion that is offered. And let's say, for example, that it was an authority that is given to the housing director, then I would want to make sure that the decision is very clear. It's yes or no. You're either going to pay this much money or you're going to build a unit. So I shouldn't have any discretion, but for paying me that fee. And that is the case also in a partial condition. Let's say, for example, that they had a 15-unit requirement, but they wanted to produce 12 units. Then could they pay the partial in lieu fee to produce 12 instead of 15 units? And again, we would do it on a formula basis, and it would be a standard yes or no for every developer, regardless of who they are.
You said, would that be an equity issue if, for example, a developer wants to build in a certain part of the city, instead of building affordable housing, they pay an in lieu fee in order to keep those particular homes at a certain price or a certain neighborhood and so forth?
I mean, at the end of the day, yes, in as much as there is a mathematical analysis that determines whether it's feasible for them to pay the in lieu fee. So if the homes are selling for $3 million, then yeah, it's probably more viable for them to pay the in lieu fee versus if the homes are selling for $300,000.
That's right. And also in lieu fees are supposed to be also used for affordability, but to finance affordable housing. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the in lieu fee that is collected is deposited into a controlled in lieu fee account, which is then used to contribute to other affordable housing production.
I personally think, Mr. Chair, that this should come to council, I think, to have us, look at that as opposed to having staff look at it. That's my personal opinion that way, because depends on who's going to develop where and so forth, and use an in lieu fee to me, it's an equity issue. That's the way I see it.
Okay.
That's my personal opinion. So,
Yes, remember.
I agree with the mayor, but I do have one question. What would be the some of the bigger benefits if this goes to staff?
The biggest benefit is certainty. Is that everybody knows that when it's happening, how it's happening, the developer can count on it, can finance against it. So that ability to know upfront is the biggest benefit to both the city staff and to the developer. They know how much it's going to cost them to do their thing.
So in other words, it's always going to be yes.
I'm sorry?
In other words, it's always going to be yes.
Well, it's going to be, this is the standard. If it meets that standard, it's going to be yes. If it doesn't meet that standard, then it's going to be no.
So the current ordinance, just on that standard part, there's 4 criteria that even the council is supposed to consider when they look at that. And it would just be that the staff is considering that, one of those being, how are we doing on meeting our goals are already? The size, type, nature of the lot. So there's criteria that's in there. So it's not, I mean, even when it's come to council, it's not always a yes, because those things are taken into consideration. And I think the newest part too with the affirmative fair housing is that's a new consideration that we probably need to add into the ordinance to make sure that we're compliant with that as well.
Say that again. Let me see.
Ms. Mallory, did you have any comment at all, or?
Let me,
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. The other is speed with staff. The issue of taking something to council does take longer for a developer, so they're looking for speed and certainty. And the affirmatively furthering fair housing is the new HCD requirement, which we would consider with the inclusionary ordinance and where units, who gets to pay that fee or not.
anyway.
I guess my only comment would be, probably the only way I would be comfortable with that suggestion, if there was some other sort of check and balance built into it. Not that anybody would
That's right.
do anything improper or wrong, but it never hurts to have an extra set of eyes. Take a look something, even if it's only on a sporadic basis. We just grab 1 or 2 out of a pile and look at them, similar to an audit. But other than that, if that doesn't exist, then I would prefer to go back to council.
Okay. What? Thank you.
Councilmember Young. Okay.
6.
So that kind of renders question 6 irrelevant. Question 6, as it is right now, the current ordinance allows the payment of the in lieu fee by donating land. In other words, producing the affordable units at a different location. That is already permitted in the inclusionary ordinance. That process requires council approval, just like the process that we just discussed. And so
They can still do it, that's what you're saying.
what we were going to suggest is if the council were to authorize the staff to approve the payment of the in lieu fee, if it was going to be done in the form of donating land or producing the units off-site, that method of paying the in lieu fee would have to come to council.
And that land would be used for affordable housing?
And that would be used for affordable housing. We did want to impose conditions on that land, which you may consider. It's not in the current ordinance. But we want to make sure that the land that is being proposed to be donated or method of payment, that it be clear, that it be clean, and that it be for residential development. Not something that the staff or some future developer would have to entitle and clean and vacate and et cetera. It's ready to move. And that the land itself is in a condition, size and shape and et cetera, to allow the development of the correct number of units that would otherwise be required in the development. And lastly, that it have a market value of at least the in lieu fee that would have been paid. So we're asking for those things, those conditions to be added. But in this case, having brought that to council anyways, then we would bring it to council for consideration, whether they're paying a fee or they're donating land.
Which they'll do it anyway.
Either way, it has to come to
Yeah.
council and the council would consider.
It's okay with me. Yep.
Okay.
I mean, so you're really asking them for feedback on those standards. That's what you want to add to the ordinance, correct, as A, B, and C?
Right, A, B, and C, the last one being a consideration that a council consideration that the land that they're donating be in some form proximate to the development that they're building.
Okay.
Potentially within the same school district or within the same neighborhood or with something that allows that, the development doesn't get built and the affordable housing get built across town, that somehow they get built within proximate condition. So those are the standards that we're seeking to add to the minimum conditions that the council would consider.
But it'll come to the council anyway.
But it would come to the council regardless.
Yeah. Okay. Mhm.
So this one's a little odd. I apologize. We were thinking about the possibility of how do we. Okay, so if since we've decided that it would be 15%, 15 of 100, and that 15 is split between very low and low for rental and low and moderate for sale. What if there was a way to produce deeper affordability? In other words, for extremely low or more very low than otherwise required? Would we give an incentive or a break, if you will, to the developer for having produced deeper affordability? So for example, in the for rent scenario, we've just concluded that the 15 units would be split 5 for very low and 10 for low. But what if they wanted to produce more very low? Could we offer the opportunity for them to produce 10 very low and thereby comply instead of 15? So 10 very low, all of them very low, or 7 extremely low and therefore comply. Extremely low is a very low income condition. So we're asking for your feedback. If the developer agrees to provide a deeper level of affordability, could they get a credit against the 15% that they otherwise would have to provide?
So instead of having a split, you can give them.
They could come up with this split that's on screen, in as much as producing extremely low income units is a very, very deep level of affordability. So would that mean that they get a credit against the 15 units that they otherwise would have to provide, in this case 7 instead of 15?
What is staff's recommendation?
Staff recommends the mix that is on screen right now.
This is a recommendation.
That mix on screen, correct.
Mhm.
And then, well, let's leave it there.
And that recommendation would require it to come to council for full consideration.
You can direct me, so we were not considering that, but if that's your direction, we can do that.
That would be my preference if we're gonna make that kind of a concession, that it should go to the full council.
Mhm.
Mayor Pro Tem, I just wanted to add that some of these provisions we're going to be overridden on with, for example, AB 2011 and other provisions from the state. Universally, to say all of these should come back to the committee or council, we wouldn't be able to commit to that here just because of the process for how those types of projects have to go through to comply with state law.
Does somebody have to request an AB 211 permit?
Some of the provisions, no, we'll have to study that, and there is a ministerial process. But we want to just add that the idea is that this would be not a one size fits all approach. It would be a percentage that would vary as we're recommending. So to say that if a project comes forward under AB 2011, that type of application, we would be bound under that provision. And Emilio, I'm not sure if you want to.
So it would not be a ministerial process.
We are still evaluating that piece. It could be a ministerial process.
Just to
But
provide
how
context
do
to that, it's not in place yet. So AB 2011 hasn't gone into effect. So some of these things are kind of unknown of how that would, it's been approved, but not active. And just like we've seen with density bonus law, it changes all the time. That could happen on AB 211 as well. That's why part of our guiding principles in this overall discussion, we're not necessarily to be consistent with those laws, but instead do what's right for Oxnard. And so in this, the context of what they're looking at here is we have a great need in our arena numbers for the very low side. We don't get a lot of requests. We don't have current ordinances that require that. This is a way to incentivize that extremely low, very low type of development and trying to remove some of the development barriers to do that. One of them, and that's partly why we didn't say bring that to council, is they're doing something that's not otherwise required. It meets our arena needs. It helps us there. This clearly needs to be flushed out more, and there's some things to learn within state law, but overall, it sounds like conceptually the committee is supportive of this. It just would need to come up to city council in those places that we're allowed to do that.
The key word is conceptually.
I mean, I'm okay with the concept, and I think
Yeah.
we should be able to reward people for going beyond the minimum requirements, but I think that's probably a discussion I would prefer to have at the council
The full
level.
council. Yeah.
You know, from there. Member Madrigal, any comment?
I just have a quick question. For example, this is from like 15 out of 100. So in other words, you build 30 units. If you build one extremely low unit, you meet your numbers. Technically, if we approve this. Because it would be about 20%. I mean, it's 5%.
In the scenario that's there, if you build 30 units,
You would just need one
you would
extremely,
need, yeah, 1 unit,
one extremely low unit and you met your criteria.
right?
Okay. And well, if we go through this, like technically, I understand where Mayor Pro Tem are coming from. But I understand where staff's coming from, that technically we would be overridden by by state law, in other words. So kind of, even if it does come to council, we have,
2011.
yeah,
So
we just kind of have to say yes.
can I don't, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The provision of the state law would have to comply with the state law in the way that AB 2011 requires it. And in that case, the council may not have discretion because the state law mandates it. Okay. It doesn't mean that the local ordinance does not also have to be complied with. So there would be two standards that the developer would have to comply with at the same time. Okay. And the compliance with 2011 may be ministerial, the council may not have discretion, but the council maintains the discretion of the inclusionary ordinance. And so we come back to council for discretion of the inclusionary ordinance, despite whether or not we have already kind of bit the bullet on AB 2011. And that will have been disclosed to council when we bring back the inclusionary compliance, as you're asking us to do. We will say, in this development, for example, we are subject to state density bonus law and AB 2011 and the additive zone, and et cetera, et cetera. So consider all these other provisions that have an effect on the effectiveness of the inclusionary ordinance. And we will bring that to council per your direction.
So we got to weigh the 211 and the.
Because you may not have it may not matter relative to your discretion because other people have imposed conditions.
We have to do it anyway. I think the city management.
Yeah, I'd just like to throw out one other public policy thought, which is it better for the council to establish very clear criteria that the staff can then implement versus every individual development coming here? Then that raises the question of who has a better lobbying effort. And then the projects may end up with different outcomes. So that's just something for consideration.
And if I can add on to that, that is something we've been discussing, is the concept of creating a different set of not the concessions that are automatically going to be waived by 2011, the parking, a variety of other concessions that we don't now have any ability to waive. So we're looking at, through this ordinance, with getting direction from council or committee here, is creating a different type of concession portfolio directly to what the city manager is talking about. We have ideas on concepts on that, but we wanted to bring this percentage forward to you, letting you know that there will be laws we have to comply with ministerially.
Regardless.
And then what is going to be the best for our community to meet the needs of, in many different ways that are non-traditional in terms of concessions. So that's what we've talked about very actively at the staff level.
The correction, committee members, Councilman Madrigal, I was confused by the math. In a 30-unit development, if they're complying with letter C.
Oh, I was talking about D.
Oh. That's why my math was wrong.
That blew your computation.
Okay, never mind.
Okay.
Okay, what's the consensus of the committee?
So, we're gonna look at it.
Okay, continue to review.
Yeah, because I I think the full council should listen to something like this.
Yeah, and regardless whether we're required to do it by state law or not, I think it's a discussion the full body should
That's
have.
the full city council.
Yeah.
And maybe when we go to the council, we can have some actual examples to Councilmember Madrigal's
Right.
point for A, B, C, and D. So help the council understand the outcomes of each of
Make it
those.
clear, yeah. Good point.
The next question is similar, and I imagine we have the same response. So this is a for sale development. Since the consensus is that we would require 5 low income and 10 moderate income, could we offer a credit if they provide deeper levels of affordability? And you can see on screen the 4 potential deeper levels of affordability that we came up with. But the discussion is identical to the one that we just had. And so I don't know if the direction would be the same.
Bring it back.
I would think it would be the same. I
Yeah.
mean, certainly staff is expected to have these discussions with the developer, but I think the ultimate decision should rise to the council level.
I should mention that in the discussions with the developers in the community, we did have that conversation. And these are at their option. So this is not a requirement of them. The requirement is that they provide 15 units, 5 for low, 10 for moderate. But if you want to do something else and you want to help us provide extremely low income units, you have this option. But the basic requirement is 5 and 10.
And they pick.
And they can pick because we have a public policy desire to provide an opportunity to an extremely low income person. But we're not mandating it because the requirement is 5 and 10.
Good. Well, I think again, full council should discuss it.
I would think so. Councilmember? Okay,
Okay.
that's our
Thank
consent.
Thank you. Those are our 7 questions. We will continue working on the amended ordinance and
Actually, it'd be more
Return.
like 10 or 12 questions because you had like 7A and 7B.
And it's very.
7B and all that, but we'll get through it.
Yeah, it's good.
sir, I can think up bureaucracy like no one's business.
Good presentation, by the way.
And Madam Clerk, we don't have any additional call-in speakers.
Chair McDonald, there's no additional speakers in person or virtually for this item.
Okay. That takes us through that item. We provided direction to Mr. Ramirez. That takes us to number 3. And the request is that the Community Services, Public Safety, Housing and Development Committee recommend council approval council approval of the EPS ordinance to regulate the use and distribution of EPS food containers and products. And that would be extended polystyrene products. Ms. Mallory.
Thank you. We're here to answer questions. I have Chelsea, who was one of the lead authors on the ordinance. We're happy to answer any of your questions. It was a pre-recorded video, so
Okay. I was just gonna say that again.
yes.
Pursuant to Measure M, we did do a pre-recorded presentation. And on the city's YouTube channel, Madam Clerk, any speakers?
Chair McDonald, there's no speakers virtually or in person for this item.
Okay, the committee members have any questions?
Yeah,
for
the only-
staff or the consultant?
The question I have is, there's exceptions to the ordinance, and can you talk a little bit about the exceptions?
Certainly, Mayor Pro Tem. So the exceptions that we identified in section 7, 352 of the ordinance exemptions. This is based upon our research in other communities and what's working. These are standard, and as a result of evaluating the various ordinances, as I mentioned. It's also directly in response to the community engagement that we had working with the fish processing facilities. And we appreciate the community that came forward and gave us some of these recommendations.
And for example, the first one is public health, safety requirements, which is, you can't, tie their hands in any way.
Absolutely. And that is a standard one in
Yeah.
virtually every single EPS ordinance we read.
Good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Councilmember?
No questions.
Okay, be the pleasure of the committee.
Is this a receive, or what are we doing here in this?
We're making a recommendation. to
Recommendation.
council.
The staff's recommendation is that the committee recommend approval of the EPS ordinance before you this evening to regulate use and distribution of EPS food containers and products.
That's my motion. That's my motion.
Oh, okay. We have motion? Councilmember?
Second.
Motion and a second, Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Member Zaragoza,
Yes.
Member Madrigal,
Yes.
Chair McDonald,
Yes,
motion passes 3-0.
Thank you.
okay. That takes us to item E, items for future agendas. Do either of the members or any of the members have any requests for future agenda items for the committee?
Not at this time.
No.
That will take us to item F, adjournment, and it is 8:38. We will consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you. So we start up with